Welcome to this deep dive. There's this classic movie trope, right? The teenager in the sports car just swiping a black credit card that magically never declines.
Oh, yeah, living that completely frictionless life where no one ever says the word no.
Exactly. And I think we all have this collective assumption that immense wealth just instantly buys this easy, consequence-free reality for the next generation.
Right, but according to our source material today, which is this really fascinating new audiobook on ultra-successful families, the reality is actually the exact opposite.
Yeah, we're talking about self-made entrepreneurs, major investors, those long-lasting family enterprises. They definitely don't just hand over a blank check.
No, not at all. They hand over a highly intentional, heavily structured system of productive struggle.
And the mission of this deep dive isn't really about money itself. It's about shifting our entire focus away from this traditional passive idea of, passing down an inheritance.
Right. It's about looking at the deliberate development of character, of judgment, and value creation. The goal isn't raising rich kids, it's raising capable human beings.
Which is such a profound shift in perspective when you really dig into the sources.
It really is. What is striking is how these high-performing families completely redefine what money actually is to their children.
Yeah, they don't see it as an identity.
Exactly. They fiercely avoid teaching their children that wealth alone creates any kind of status or superiority or personal worth.
So what do they tie worth to then?
For them, a person's worth is intrinsically connected to their effort, their skill, their discipline, basically, what they contribute to the world.
So money is just a tool.
Just a wrench in the toolbox. It's a highly effective mechanism that can, create opportunities or solve complex logistical problems, but it is entirely detached from who you are as a human being.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if money is just a high-powered tool, it's like putting a teenager in the cockpit of a commercial jet.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. You don't start them at 30,000 feet and just hope they figure out the controls.
Yeah, that would be a disaster.
You start them in a flight simulator where crashing has no real-world consequences. Or, if it's a power tool, you don't give a kid a chainsaw. You start them on sandpaper.
Sandpaper, then a handsaw, and eventually the power tools.
Exactly. And the sources outline a very specific age-based progression these families use to teach financial autonomy. It acts as that flight simulator.
And the overarching objective of this progression is developing judgment, not just financial literacy.
So what does the sandpaper phase look like?
Well, from ages 5 to 10, the focus is incredibly foundational. It's about building the initial neural pathways for resource allocation.
So not macroeconomics.
Oh, definitely not. They are just grasping the basic reality of opportunity cost through saving, spending, and giving.
Just forming habits.
Yeah. Like, if a 7-year-old takes their finite allowance and buys a toy today, they physically cannot buy the larger item they wanted next week.
It's a tactile, low-stakes introduction to the fact that resources are finite.
No matter how big the house they live in is.
Right. So moving from that tactile phase to ages 11 through 15, the curriculum scales up, right? To budgeting, earning money, and delayed gratification.
That's the handsaw phase, yes.
But I want to push back on this a little bit, though.
Yeah.
Because a 13-year-old tracking a budget that just feels like a basic accounting exercise, how does making a middle schooler input numbers on a spreadsheet actually build complex judgment?
Well, what's fascinating here is that it entirely changes the psychology of decision-making.
How so?
By shifting the antagonist in the child's life. Think about it. When a teenager relies on a parent to approve every purchase, the parent becomes the gatekeeper.
Right. It creates an emotional power struggle. Why won't you buy this for me? We have the money.
Exactly. But when a teenager is given a set budget to manage their own discretionary expenses, they are suddenly forced to weigh trade-offs themselves.
Oh, I see. The parent is no longer the bad guy saying no.
The math says no. The budget becomes an objective, unemotional reality check.
So knowledge is knowing how to add and subtract your allowance. But judgment is ink.
Judgment is staring at that spreadsheet and deciding whether a fleeting purchase is actually worth the opportunity cost of emptying your account.
You remove the parent from the friction, the constraint becomes the bad guy, which really mimics the real world.
It does, and by the time they hit ages 16 to 21, they're moving out of the simulator.
Into the single-engine prop plane.
Yes, the responsibility increases exponentially in those late teen and early adult years. This phase shifts to real-world investing, independent problem solving, and often early entrepreneurship.
So they're actually managing real capital.
Yes, even if it's on a small scale. Young adults in these families are actively encouraged to make substantial decisions.
Why give them that much rope at that age, though?
It's all about the concept of asymmetric risk. It is vastly better for a 19-year-old to make a poorly researched investment and lose, say, $5,000 of their own managed portfolio
Than it is for a 35-year-old to inherit $5 million with absolutely no experience in risk assessment.
precisely.
But even if you perfectly calibrate a teenager's budget or give them a starter portfolio, they're still going to blow it at some point. I mean, a 19-year-old is biologically wired to make at least a few terrible decisions.
Oh, inevitably.
And when that happens, the parents face a much harder test than just setting up a spreadsheet.
Which brings us to this concept of controlled exposure to difficulty.
Yes.
Because when these kids fail, the way these ultra-successful families handle the adversity is completely counterintuitive to how most of the modern world operates.
It really centers around a deeply held philosophy regarding work ethic and resilience. These families deliberately choose not to protect their children from every challenge.
Which is wild to think about.
In fact, the source material explicitly lists rescuing children from every difficulty as one of the most catastrophic mistakes a wealthy family can make.
Wow.
They insist on letting their children face the natural consequences of their actions. Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because I have a real problem with this, or at least I see a massive contradiction here.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I am a self-made entrepreneur and I spent 40 years working 80-hour weeks, specifically so my family wouldn't have to struggle the way I did, stepping back and watching my kids suffer feels wrong.
It goes against the primal biological instinct, right?
Right.
To protect your offspring.
Exactly. And furthermore, doesn't engineering a fake struggle for a kid who lives in a mansion feel completely manufactured? How do these families avoid making this feel like they're just, LARPing poverty?
That is the central emotional challenge for the parents, and it requires immense cognitive discipline to overcome that primal instinct. But to address your contradiction, this raises an important question. The struggle isn't engineered.
It's not.
No. The natural state of the world is struggle, friction, and failure. What wealth does is create an artificial layer of insulation against that reality. So these families are not inventing problems for their kids. They are simply choosing not to deploy their artificial insulation.
So if a teenager spends their entire semester allowance on a designer jacket and can't afford to go on a weekend trip with their friends,
The parent isn't creating the problem. They're just refusing to write the rescue check.
they're refusing to interrupt the feedback loop of cause and effect.
Precisely. Because if you interrupt that feedback loop, you are replacing a safety net with a hammock.
A hammock. That is a brutal way to put it, but so true.
There's a fundamental difference between comfort and success. We often conflate the two, right? Assuming that if our loved ones are comfortable and insulated from pain, they are thriving.
But they're really just fragile.
Exactly. True. Deep-seated resilience cannot be taught through a lecture or read in a book. You cannot explain the concept of grit to a young adult and expect them to suddenly possess it.
No, resilience only grows through the physical, emotional experience of struggling, independently solving a problem, and realizing you can actually survive a setback.
Yes. Letting them fail, assuming the physical and emotional stakes are safe, is a direct investment in their future durability.
Because by rescuing them from a non-lethal mistake at age 15, you basically guarantee their vulnerability to a catastrophic mistake at age 30.
Exactly. You're depriving them of the exact psychological calluses they need to survive when the stakes are real.
And the source material takes this beyond just letting them fail financially. It emphasizes that this concept of productive struggle has to be actively applied to their work ethic.
Yes, these parents construct environments where effort is a non-negotiable requirement. This goes far beyond basic chores, by the way.
What does it look like?
It involves participating in the actual operations of the family, taking on internships early, committing to long-term community service, or even just holding down a standard part-time job in the service industry.
So they're taught to walk into a room, notice a problem, and devise a solution.
Because the core economic lesson they need to internalize is that value is created by solving problems for other people.
Not by simply existing and consuming resources.
Right.
But, creating that productive struggle is impossible if the parents don't have a backbone. To willingly stand back, watch your kid fail, and endure the emotional friction of them being angry with you that requires a massive anchor.
It does.
You need a framework that the whole family understands before the failure even happens, so it doesn't just feel like arbitrary cruelty.
And the sources outline a very specific, overarching governance system these families use to prioritize character over raw talent. It essentially acts as the constitution for the family.
Okay, what is it?
It's a 6-part framework, explicitly designed to be modeled by the adults and taught to the children. Let me run through them.
Go for it.
Teach responsibility before privilege. Teach contribution before consumption. Teach discipline before freedom. Teach service before status. Teach character before wealth. And teach wisdom before power.
Okay, those are great, but don't just give me the bumper sticker version, though. Like, contribution before consumption sounds great on a plaque, but what does that actually look like on a Tuesday afternoon?
Fair point.
How do you practically enforce that in a household with virtually unlimited resources?
It manifests in the daily operational mechanics of the family. So let's look at that one contribution before consumption. In practical terms, this means a teenager does not simply get a car because they turned 16.
No shiny new convertible just for breathing.
Exactly. The consumption of that massive resource must be preceded by a demonstrated contribution to the family or the community.
Like what?
Perhaps they must maintain a job to pay for the insurance, or they are now responsible for driving their younger siblings to all their activities, effectively solving a logistical problem for the parents.
So the privilege is directly tethered to an ongoing responsibility.
And if the contribution stops, the consumption is immediately halted.
Wow. It fundamentally rewrites the entitlement equation. You are completely severing the idea that simply being born into a specific family grants you access to the vault.
It treats character traits as the actual currency of the family. Honesty, integrity, humility, reliability, accountability.
The stuff that actually matters.
They require their children to keep their commitments, to tell the truth even when it carries a penalty, to admit their mistakes openly, and to accept the consequences without trying to negotiate their way out of it.
And I imagine this deeply informs how they teach leadership, too.
Absolutely. In these environments, leadership is never framed as the authority to boss people around. It is framed as the ultimate responsibility.
A leader serves the group.
Yes, they absorb the blame when a project fails and aggressively distribute the credit to the team when things go right.
To actually instill this, though, you need more than just rules. If you're operating this like a family enterprise, how do you prove to the younger generation that this framework isn't just a set of arbitrary, strict constraints invented to make their lives harder?
The most effective mechanism these families use to operationalize these values is highly structured family storytelling.
Storytelling.
Yeah. They don't just have casual dinners, they hold regular, deliberate discussions about their history, their goals, and their financial realities. But the stories they choose to tell are the crucial element.
The generational lore. So what does this all mean? When I was looking through the sources, my immediate theory was that sharing the parents' or the grandparents' absolute worst failures is actually their secret weapon.
Spot on.
Because it's one thing to sit a kid down and say, you need to be resilient and appreciate the value of $1. It's entirely different to say, hey, let's talk about 1988, when your grandfather over-leveraged the company on a terrible real estate deal, completely misread the market, and nearly bankrupted us.
Right.
Let's talk about the shame he felt having to lay off half his staff and the 5 years of brutal, humbling work it took to dig out of that debt.
And that serves a vital anthropological function within the family unit. By explicitly detailing those failures, the sacrifices, and the humiliations, the parents normalize the productive struggle.
It proves to the younger generation that the comfort they are currently experiencing was not manifested by magic or luck or divine right.
It was bought and paid for by someone else's resilience and grit.
It shatters the illusion of invincibility. It forces the child to realize that the family is vulnerable and therefore they are vulnerable.
Yes, it creates a shared identity rooted in endurance rather than entitlement. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you see a deliberate curriculum of social awareness.
Applied human nature, basically.
Exactly. Through absorbing these stories and participating in structured family governance, children learn to listen carefully to different perspectives. They learn to identify the incentives that drive human behavior, both good and bad.
They learn the mechanics of clear communication, fair negotiation, and the slow, delicate process of building trust.
They aren't just raising future wealth managers, they are engineering highly capable human beings who deeply understand how the mechanics of the world actually work.
Which brings us to the ultimate payoff of this entire approach. We started this deep dive looking at the stereotype of the trust fund kid, the fragile, entitled consumer, and we've unpacked the exact architecture these families use to ensure that stereotype never materializes.
The central unifying realization across all of these sources, whether you are looking at a self-made tech founder or a multi-generational manufacturing family, is an acute awareness that wealth is incredibly fragile.
Very fragile.
The most effective families operate on the assumption that markets will eventually crash. Entire industries they currently dominate will inevitably change or become obsolete.
Financial wealth can be utterly wiped out in a single generation.
But if you have spent 2 decades instilling ironclad character, if you have developed sharp analytical judgment, if you have taught a young adult how to build trust, understand human nature, and solve complex problems, those are durable advantages.
The financial capital might evaporate, but the human capital remains intact. The ability to look at a chaotic situation, identify a need, and create value out of nothing but your own effort and intelligence, that is an asset that survives any economic downturn.
It is the only true inheritance.
It's a massive paradigm shift. We set out to look at how the ultra-wealthy handle money. And the great irony is that the most successful among them spend their time trying to neutralize the money entirely.
They don't aim for wealthy children. They aim for capable, resilient adults.
And what's so compelling about this framework is its universal application. You do not need a family office or a trust fund to utilize this.
Not at all.
Whether you are navigating how to raise your own kids, whether you are managing and mentoring junior colleagues in your career, or honestly, if you're just aggressively focusing on your own self-development, these principles scale perfectly.
They really do.
The concept of responsibility before privilege, the practice of forcing the math to say no, and the willingness to engage in productive struggle, they work exactly the same way with $200 in your checking account as they do with $20 million.
They're just the fundamental laws of building durable competence. It's an operating system for human development, entirely independent of your tax bracket.
Perfectly said.
As we close out our analysis of these sources, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building directly on the psychology of that rescue impulse we explored.
Okay.
We established that true, durable resilience can only be built through controlled exposure to difficulty by allowing the natural consequences of a situation to play out without artificial insulation.
Right.
So, looking at your own life, what is a productive struggle right now that you are currently rescuing yourself from or artificially rescuing someone you love from that you should actually be stepping back and letting run its natural course?
Man. Because sometimes the absolute most loving and effective thing you can do for someone is to put away the safety net, refuse to write the check, and let them figure out exactly how capable they really are. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take these frameworks, seek out the productive struggles in your own life, and start building some durable advantages of your own.